What's poppin', folks? Let's cut straight to the chase. Today we're just going to be recapping week one in the USFL, just having a little discussion about everything that happened from attendance to how the games looked to what players stood out, all that.
I think the first thing that I wanted to talk about was kind of just the state of the league and what both of our opinions were on the play that we saw this weekend, kind of the new advancements in the game that we saw. Specifically, the thing that I wanted to mention was the drone footage, and I thought that it was a good idea. Also, helmet cams, they introduce a bunch of new ways to like show how football is being played. And I think that for the most part, it was a success. The helmet cam, the actual video quality was kind of shaky, and overall video quality was not on par with the NFL, but you can't necessarily expect it to be. The drone footage was okay and pretty good in some instances, and then in some others, it just doesn't work and it doesn't really make any sense to have it. But it's cool to see them shake up the quality of video footage.
It's always nice to see leagues try new things when it comes to, these spring leagues. We've seen the XFL have a couple advancements when it comes to redoing the way that we watch football. That was a whole lot of nothing from me. But point being, these leagues try to be innovative. We've seen like the Skycam from the XFL, and the
Yep.
USFL has tried some wacky stuff so far, like the drones on kickoffs. Frankly, I hate that camera angle. I can't tell what's going on, but Twitter seemed to
Fair.
love it for some reason.
Yeah.
So, hey, this league can use all the good press it can get. One thing that I did notice was kicking was awful throughout the league,
Yeah.
and I assumed that it was because these rosters have only been together for 3 weeks. Those are only 3 weeks of practice with the long snapper, the punter, and the kicker. So those are three guys you need to be in sync, and I figured that was the issue. They just didn't practice enough. But it turns out they put like these electronics in the ball. I think it's to like better measure the ball placement or something like that
Yeah.
when it crosses the goal line or something. But apparently screws up the weight of the ball, and that's what's been causing the horrible kicking, is because it's a weight that the players aren't used to, and apparently the
Yeah.
specialists are fuming because of it. I figured the quarterbacks probably aren't happy either.
Yeah, I remember they said that the USFL balls are significantly harder and more heavy than regular NFL balls, so there's obviously going to have to be some adjustments there. But what's confusing to me is that usually they have kicking balls. Like in the NFL, there are specific balls for kicking, for kickers. And why, like, does the USFL just not have those? That doesn't really make too much sense and is something that they should probably figure out before they continue.
Yeah, they sell footballs, just go grab some from the shop.
Yeah.
The XFL didn't have kicking balls, but their ball, they like tried to make the optimum football for both passing and kicking, and that
Mm.
was kind of their niche. I know they gave one to McAfee and had him kick it around a bunch, but I don't think the USFL really values special teams as much as the XFL did.
Yeah. I mean, I think when they have it be capable to score 9 points in a possession, and they're encouraging more 2 point conversions, encouraging now 3 point conversions instead of just taking the PAT. I think it's obvious that these spring leagues are trying to move away from kickers, from special teams play, but they also want to try and make opening kickoffs more interesting. There's kind of an imbalance there, and I think that this is probably the most effective way to kill special teams if you actually want to.
Yeah, and that's something we can talk about. They have this weird kickoff rule where they moved it back so you kick it off from the 25 instead of the 35, and that makes it so that the ball is in play. And I think it's like you can't, gunners can't run until the ball is caught or something like that. Something
Something
of that
it's weird.
nature. But,
Can't really see what's going on with the drone shots, so
oh yeah, so just gonna have to assume. If only we got a wide shot of it, but. Whatever, innovation isn't a bad thing, especially in a league like this.
Yeah. But outside of kicking and the quality of play, at least in the special teams department, what were your thoughts on the overall play on the field that we saw this weekend and like the quality of the games?
Notice different things from different teams. For example, the first, like, we'll go in depth about each game because there's only four of them. But for the first game, I felt like both teams looked very polished and ready to be out there,
Yeah.
and it just looked like good football. There were times where the offense was dominant. There was times where the defense snuffed them out, and it was a very even game between two appearing to be good teams. But then when we got into Sunday's action, Houston and Michigan was a very sloppy affair. Both teams seemed very ill prepared. And on Monday night, Pittsburgh just looked awful.
Hmm.
It looked like they didn't believe in their coach at all, which is something we could get into. And they
Hmm.
started erratically changing quarterbacks, where that's something that we kind of noticed from every team. I think almost every team, except for maybe like Philly, played two quarterbacks. We saw that with New Jersey, where
Hmm.
they had Luis Perez come in and he was their passing guy and he did a great job. And DeAndre Johnson came in on running downs and he was the league's leading rusher. And that worked.
Hmm.
Like Michigan, just pulling Shea Patterson and throwing Paxton Lynch in didn't work. And in a very weird turn, Pittsburgh came out with Josh Love instead of Kyle Laletta, who everyone
Hmm.
expected to start. And then when Love played predictably bad, he threw Laletta back in and pulled him in and out a few more times. And it was just an odd decision by Kirby Wilson in his first real head coaching shot.
Yeah. The Maulers have kind of made themselves the laughing stock of the league already with their incident over the first weekend where the USFL's Hard Knocks kind of esque show where they cut Davion Smith, who was a running back, for choosing to eat pizza over, I believe it was chicken salad. And the Maulers then went out and said that it was because of an interaction that he had with one of the cooks and his treatment of one of the facility members there, which Davion then came out on Twitter and went on a multiple tweet rant about how that was a complete lie. So it's publicity, and while people say that good publicity, any publicity is good publicity, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is something that the USFL should be or should want to be dealing with right now because it is kind of a negative look on the league.
Yeah, the entire situation was, guess, I'm not sure what the living situation is in
Hmm.
there. It was either the hotel or the league that was providing food for the players, and he didn't want chicken salad. And somebody, I don't know who the person was, maybe it was just somebody staying at the hotel, I don't know who it was, had a pizza, and he said, "Hey, can I get some pizza?" Maybe it was like a hotel worker that was bringing it for someone else, and they're like, "No, we have chicken salad for the players. Is that going to be a problem?" And he said, "Yeah," and then he walked away.
Hmm.
And kind of, I don't even know if that was the right response by Davion, but it definitely didn't warrant cutting him,
Yeah.
especially given the fact that he was a productive back at Michigan and was one of the best backs in the XFL for the Tampa Bay
Hmm.
Vipers. And we saw a horrible Pittsburgh Maulers team that only put up 3 points. So, yeah, they could have
Yeah.
used him. The
Yeah.
best thing for the USFL to do at this point would be to have like the New Jersey Generals sign him or something. Get him
Hmm.
away from Kirby Wilson and just give him another shot in the league. And
Yeah.
I I don't know if it's necessarily more of a reflection on Kirby Wilson or the league as a whole. Don't know if it was his decision or a higher ups decision, but he kind of follows the Joe Judge, Matt Patricia wannabe Belichick formula of trying to be a
Hmm.
hard ass for no reason. And I don't know, it's just not something I can picture Jeff Fisher doing. I don't think Jeff Fisher would care if a guy wanted a slice of pizza.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think that the Maulers and Kirby Wilson out of the gate are probably the worst team to appear on and off the field this weekend. And it's something that the league is going to need to address as a whole because there obviously is only one single ownership. There's not like a massive ownership group. You can't just own one of the teams like the league owns all the teams right now. So I guess it's address one, address all in that kind of situation. The only other thing that I wanted to mention before we get into our breakdowns of the actual games is kind of my hot take on this. The XFL kind of did this, but on-field interviews, I'm not a fan of them whatsoever. I just don't like when I was watching the Bandits and Maulers game. I saw Jordan Teamu sitting on the bench and he put on a headset and was talking to the guys up in the booth. I just don't like that. Like it shouldn't be there like Teamu should be sitting on the bench getting ready for the next drive, not doing an interview with the people up in the booth. I just don't think that it's not necessary, and I don't think that it really does much or adds much, and it's kind of gimmicky.
I can see that. When you said that, my mind instantly went to a very clearly concussed Tommy Maddox doing a sideline interview in the XFL in 2000. But I also remember Matt McGloin being interviewed before halftime during a New York Guardians game, and he said something like "We're getting our ass kicked" or something like that, and he was very clearly pissed, and that was
Hmm.
kind of interesting to see. But I think they tried to make it like a NASCAR thing.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, it was on Fox, so
Yep.
it was probably a NASCAR crew doing the game, not the announcers, but some of the people like having the equipment and stuff set
Yeah.
up. Uh, I could see maybe like a defensive back like getting a pick and then putting on the headset and talking about like how the game's going or something like that. But
Hmm.
the NFL, you see quarterbacks on the tablet or on the field, you know?
Yep.
So take Tamu away from that.
Yeah. The only other thing that I wanted to mention about that was they had hot mics, and you could like very easily hear the players down on the field. And I think that that's fine. That's better. You obviously just have to be a little bit careful with that, but it did make for some good social media clips, specifically from the New Orleans Breakers. They had some guys talking to the Stars, and I mean it's enjoyable to see those on the field interactions, and I think that they did a pretty good job at it. And then with the attendance, there was decent attendance for the Stallions and Generals game, right?
Oh yeah, it looked
Yeah.
very well filled. I don't think they opened up the top level, but
Hmm.
the seats that were there looked almost sold out.
I mean, outside of that game, because they're playing all the games in Birmingham, which doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand it. Who knows? But outside of that Stallions game, just watching the Breakers, Gamblers, and Bandits game. Granted, the Bandits game was on a Monday because they had to postpone it, and the Gamblers game got there was a bit of a rain delay. There were not many people there whatsoever, and that was a little worrisome. So it obviously makes sense since those teams aren't supposed to be in Birmingham and nobody really cares about them since they're not the Birmingham Stallions. So I think that they might have a bit of an attendance problem and hopefully that they can figure that out.
I think we might see that problem get solved a little bit because tickets are $10, kids get in free, and when you buy a ticket for that day essentially.
Hmm.
So like week 2 on Saturday, 11 there's Mahler's Stars, and then at 6 is Stallions Gamblers. And I
Yeah,
assume that we're going to see people still show up for the Birmingham Stallions.
yeah,
And when they buy tickets for the Stallions game, why not just go in a little earlier and catch a second
yeah.
game for $10?
And I'm pretty sure that There was a little bit of controversy with this. I remember seeing a tweet on it that staff employees of the stadium weren't letting them leave and then come back, but apparently USFL policy says that you can leave the stadium and then come back even with your ticket. So people will be able to leave in between games. So that might be able to help the attendance numbers. I think that the attendance was probably halted in a little we didn't see it that much simply because of those rain delays and those rainouts. But it's something that I thought was worth mentioning.
I think you also have to consider like they showed up on Saturday for the Stallions, and that looked great.
Yeah.
But it was Easter Sunday. It was the first week that it was happening. A lot of people already went to the Stallions game. It was crappy weather. Uh, can kind of write them a pass on this. If the Stallions game looked like the rest of them, I'd be very concerned. But the fact that they
Hmm.
showed up for the Stallions, and it eases my mind a little bit.
Yeah. All right. With all of that being said, since you are the honorary Birmingham Stallions fan, I will let you take the lead on the first game and recapping the Stallions and Generals. Also, I was not able to watch most of it because I was at prom.
Yeah, so this one was about as good as you could hope that a first game could be. The fans were there, they were hyped. You got this whole dual broadcast thing that they were super proud of. Going up against the NBA playoffs and still got in, what, 3 million viewers. So they definitely should be proud of this. And the 3 million people who tuned into this game definitely got a show. It was a tight game, 24-28. The ultimate deciding factor of this game was Elliott Fry's inability to kick a field goal. He missed a 22-yarder and a 30-yard field goal. If he made those, it's a very different game. Uh, but of course, he missed, and the Stallions went out on top because of a great touchdown drive at the end of the game by the backup quarterback.
Hmm.
I don't know what the Stallions quarterback situation is at this point. Alex Magoo came in, and first pass was fantastic. It was a deep ball right on the money in the end zone. Receiver didn't even really have to adjust that much to make the play. Touchdown. Looked like everything was going to be great. He finished the day 5 for 10 for 55 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Not great. Then his backup, who played for Coach Skip Holtz at Louisiana Tech, went 11 for 21, 52.4% completion percentage, 156 yards, and a touchdown, and the game winning rushing touchdown. But if you watch the game, his play wasn't really all that inspiring until the last drive. So I have no idea what the future of the Birmingham Stallions quarterback position is going to be. I said they should have taken Luis Perez, and they passed on him twice. And he played for the Generals and had a great game. He split reps with DeAndre Johnson, who was very clearly the run first guy. So Perez was basically the quarterback, going 13 for 18, two touchdowns and 143 yards. Very respectable performance by the former Birmingham Iron quarterback.
The Stallions quarterback situation probably going to be a bit of a carousel, just like I think just about every team's going to be. Like you said, Luis Perez, Birmingham Iron, taught himself how to play quarterback watching YouTube videos. I always find that story really interesting. He had a really good game, and then DeAndre Johnson had 12 rushing attempts for 98 yards. And the Stallions, or the Generals, sorry, had a really good rushing attack overall because their other running backs averaged 4.4 yards per carry and 4.2 yards per carry, and they had three guys with attempts over 10. So overall, really good game to showcase the league. Like you said, in the bits that I was able to watch, uh, not sloppy at all. But when we get into the second game, which was the Panthers and the Gamblers, that game was a little bit more sloppy. I was able to catch a bit of that game, and uh, the Gamblers only had 10 completions on the day. even though they ended up winning. Jeff Fisher didn't do a great job coaching. Thorson ended up being the starting quarterback. He was 9 for 17 for 52% completion percentage, only 73 yards and one touchdown. And then their running game kind of got going. Thompson had 13 attempts for 71 yards and 5.5 yards per carry. Didn't have a touchdown. The defense kind of carried this game for them. And then on the Panthers side, Shea Patterson was 17 for 25, 192 yards and a touchdown. Probably one of the better quarterbacks. Paxton Lynch came in. He had a fumble and threw an interception and didn't look good at all. So Patterson probably has that job on lockdown going into week 2. And Lynch really isn't going to do much, I bet.
Yeah, I was surprised that Jeff Fisher even put Paxton Lynch in the game, and anybody who thought that Jeff Fisher's amazing coaching would revive Paxton Lynch's career, well, you're probably wrong. But yeah, Patterson started off really poorly, and well, that's just kind of the story of the game. The Gamblers started off really hot. The Panthers looked really sloppy and poorly coached, and then the Gamblers and Coach Kevin Sumlin kind of fell apart, and the Panthers came back towards the end, and the Gamblers just held on to win 17-12 after having a 17-0 lead. So it was just a very sloppy game all around, but
All right, with that being out of the way, now let's get into my favorite team, the New Orleans Breakers, who got a 23-17 dub over the Philadelphia Stars. The Stars were probably this was probably the only game in which both teams only used one quarterback. The Stars had Scott, who went 25 for 36 for 202 yards, a touchdown and an interception, or Bryson Scott,
Byron.
Byron. And then and the Bakers, Kyle Sloter was the quarterback. He didn't look great, but he got the job done, going 17 for 27, didn't throw a touchdown, and had an interception and 150 yards. We had probably the best running back of the week, with Jordan Ellis getting 18 attempts for 89 yards, averaging 4.9 yards per carry and a touchdown. Our second running back, Logan Jr., had 15 attempts for 56 yards, 3.7 yards per carry and a touchdown as well. Probably the best rushing attack, with a combined 171 yards and 4.4 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. So pretty good day for New Orleans. You would have liked, as a fan of them, I would have liked to see them put the game away a little bit better, because they were up 9-0, and they were up, I believe, even 12-0 at one point. And no, they were only up 9. They were up 9-0, and then Philadelphia kind of came back and they took the lead, and they were up 17-9, and then New Orleans came back and they ended up scoring 14 unanswered points. So I would have liked to seen a little bit more consistency from Sloter, because the only footage that we've seen of him was really from his Broncos and Vikings preseason games, where he was an absolute god. He didn't really show that in this, and again, this game was kind of sloppy. Again, it was bad weather, and I think that we'll get to see better football as the weeks progress and we get to see the league go on, and hopefully this league can actually finish, unlike the AAF and the XFL.
I don't know why I called him Byron. His name is Brian. I didn't have to
Okay,
look that
that's
up.
what I
I knew
said.
it. I don't know why I thought his name was Byron, and that's bothered me since
That's
I
what
said it.
that's what I
Uh,
originally said.
I don't know
You
why that came
corrected
across
me.
my mind, but
That's
yeah,
funny.
it wasn't like a torrential downpour for any of the games. But even
Hmm.
at the Stallions game, I noticed players were slipping and dropping passes that they should make. So I wondered if like the weather in Alabama was moist and
Hmm.
that was causing some of the issues and causing some of the slippage. And we kind of got that answer the next day with the rain delay giving us Monday night USFL action. But yeah, the weather certainly didn't cooperate for this first weekend, and I think that probably contributed a lot to the sloppy play because you already
Yeah.
have so much going against you with only knowing these guys for 3 weeks, trying to learn a new system that most of these guys never played for these coaches before, and add terrible field conditions on top of that. I guess that brings us to the Monday night action, which honestly they failed to market this better. Uh, I'm surprised that they didn't try and get a deal done with ESPN for a Monday night SFL. Maybe see what the Mannings are up to for a little Manning cast or something.
That would have been good.
But yes, this game
Sure,
was.
Todd Haley could have talked to him.
I don't know. Well, he knows them. He probably could have gotten like an Antonio Brown cast, which would have been as interesting. But
That would have brought in a lot of views.
this game was a total snooze fest. I watched for Battlehawks alum Jordan Teamu, who threw a couple picks, one of which was not his fault at all. But as we were saying
The other
earlier,
pick was at the end of the first half, and he was just taking a deep shot. So I don't think either of the interceptions were on him, really.
he's a good quarterback, and
Yeah.
I think he's probably going to be the best quarterback in this league. It's hard to really gauge how well these teams are based off of 1 week. I think we know who's bad, but I think it's going to take a couple weeks before we really know who's good. But Teamu came out and he was slinging it, and which is exactly what I wanted to see. He has a couple decent receivers, notably Vinny Papale. He should have had Eli Rogers, former Steeler, but he didn't show up. But we could just see that the Maulers did not look to be in this at all. I already, I've already seen the memes. Pittsburgh Maulers going to the chicken salad bowl. It doesn't look like it's gonna happen this year for the Pittsburgh Maulers,
Yeah.
unfortunately for them. But I wouldn't be shocked if they go winless just based on this horrendous performance week one. I think we've definitely found our basement dweller.
Yeah, I think the Maulers have kind of solidified themselves as the worst team in the league so far because they had Kyle Love go 9 for 16 for 121 yards, and then Kyle Laletta wasn't ever able to really get it going because Kirby Wilson didn't give him a shot to. He just took him in and out of the game, and Laletta only went 2 for 10 for 8 yards. They couldn't get anything going on the ground, only averaging 2.8 yards per carry between two different running backs. No receivers had over 50 yards. Their defense wasn't anything that like their defense didn't show up that much. Uh, they hey, they were 1 for 1 on field goals. They made a field goal. That's about the only positive that you can take away from the Maulers. And then with the Tampa Bay Bandits, Jordan Teamu, me and you are both going to be biased for him, but he did look really good. He probably looked like the best quarterback, even though he threw 2 interceptions. Again, both of them didn't really have an effect on the game. They didn't really have that good of a ground game. They scored 1 touchdown and had 64 total yards and 2.1 yards per carry. That's not something you want to see. O'Grady had 8 yards and 8 receptions for 86 yards. He looked pretty good. And then there really wasn't too much else to this game. They did miss a field goal to further those kicking narratives that we were pointing out. But with all of that being said, I wrote down a little bit of a power rankings for where I think teams stand. I'm just going to go over this. I think we've made our points clear. The Maulers look like the worst team in the league. The Panthers were probably the second worst because of how sloppy they played. I'd say that the Stars and Generals are pretty close to, or the Stars, Generals, and Stallions are pretty close to being tied. But since the Stallions were the only ones to win, I put them at number 5, the Generals at 6, and Stars. Or I put the Stallions at 4, the Generals at 5, and Stallions at 4, the Generals at 5, and the Stars at 6. And then I think that it's pretty clear that the top 3 teams in the league right now, who are probably going to be the most likely competing for the championship, are going to be the Gamblers, Breakers, and Bandits. Because Todd Haley's a pretty good coach, Jordan Teamu's good, Kyle Sloter looked solid, and the Breakers had the best run game and a pretty solid defense, and then the Gamblers just played all around pretty good football. So that was my brief kind of power rankings for where I think teams stand in the league right now, and that is very subjected to change because, like Connor said, we don't really know what these teams are like.
If I'm gonna do my power rankings, I'd definitely put the Maulers at 8, and then I'd probably go Panthers at 7, 6. I guess the Stars, because again, those mid-tier teams are so close. And then
Hmm.
probably I'd go Gamblers. And then the first game is really interesting to me because they lost, but just by watching how that team played, I think there is a very likely chance that the New Jersey Generals could make a case for best team in the league, even though they lost week one. Like I said, they lost because they missed a 22 and a 30-yard field goal. If they make those, they win, and we're not
Yeah.
talking about this. So I think you have to put the Generals up there despite the L. Overall,
Hmm.
I'd say that the best team, just based on what they look like on paper, has to be the Tampa Bay Bandits, and then it's
Yeah.
just kind of a hodgepodge of other teams and the Maulers at the bottom.
Yeah. With all of that out of the way, I guess we can do a little bit of a prediction for next week and just gloss over what those games are going to look like. I believe we have the Panthers and Generals on Friday night.
Kind of odd to have a game on Friday night, but I
Yeah.
dig the concept of Friday night football.
Yeah, it's going to be Panthers and Generals on Friday night. I think that that'll be a decent game. The Generals are probably, like you said, the better team in that matchup. So if I'm going to predict anybody to win, it would be them. And then the Maulers and Stars play, and the Stallions and Gamblers play on Saturday. Both of those games are going to be on Fox and FS1. Those should be some pretty solid games, I think.
Yeah,
But
that's probably the most interesting rivalry you have here with Pittsburgh and Philadelphia.
yeah,
And that's
that's
probably
true.
why it got the Fox nod to try and
Hmm.
gain viewership from Pennsylvania. I assume because it's being played in Birmingham that they'll have some sort of watch parties set up in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia like the
Yeah,
Battlehawks had here in St. Louis. Or heck, Pittsburgh fans travel well. You never know. Uh,
never know.
and I'm going to wager though that it looks like the best attended game outside of the first Stallions game, or
Hmm.
outside of any Stallions game because the Stallions play the Gamblers later that night,
Yeah,
and hopefully the Stallions win that game. But frankly, I have no idea.
yeah. And then on Sunday we have my assumption for what will be the best matchup of the week, and probably the two best teams playing each other in the New Orleans Breakers and the Tampa Bay Bandits getting to play each other at 2 p.m. on NBC Sunday, April 24th.
Pretty interesting slate. Next week is coined the USFL Rivalry Week.
Hmm.
These teams were assigned rivalries. A lot of them don't make sense geographically. Like, why does Michigan hate New Jersey? But the one that really makes sense here is Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. So that'll be definitely interesting to see. And maybe New Orleans,
Yeah,
Tampa.
New Orleans, Tampa. That makes sense. That's pretty good.
We've seen a
Birmingham and
couple
Houston makes sense as well.
pretty good New Orleans Tampa games these past few years,
Hmm. Couple of them.
except for the playoffs.
Yeah, we don't talk about that. We just talk about the regular season, specifically the Sunday night games.
Beautiful.
Yes. But with all of that being out of the way, thank you all very much for listening to this edition of Prime Sports Network USFL. Uh, I'm Braden Dowers. You can find me on Twitter at Show Me Baseball, Braden Dowers. You can find Connor at what Twitter do you want to plug today?
Go to my YouTube, actually, Prime Connor.
Okay.
I've actually started to upload shit.
All right, so go follow Connor on YouTube. Make sure to follow Prime Sports Network on Twitter as well at Prime S Network 1. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. You know the drill here on YouTube. And we will see you in the next episode, which will probably be a Deadbirds discussion tomorrow. Doodles.